These files were never meant to be public, but someone reopened them. This is the Dark Bureau. In the pre-dawn darkness, the distant pulse of container cranes echoes across a heavily guarded harbour. Here, in the glow of floodlights and under the gaze of uniformed security, rows of steel containers descend one by one from ships flying foreign flags. Officially, these are the mechanics of global commerce: routine deliveries, clearing customs, and entering the economy of a developing port. But the narrative on the invoices tells only the surface of the story. Quietly, as paperwork is stamped, encrypted notifications confirm that a substantial offshore payment has landed, not referred to in any tender, no record available to domestic auditors, and processed through a thicket of shell corporations with no visible link to their actual beneficiaries. The warehouse gates swing open. Heavy trucks begin their journey inland. Yet the control of this strategic gateway has shifted already, behind a latticework of holding companies whose true owners are shielded behind layers of legal opacity. Days later, public celebrations erupt down the coast. Officials gather for a ribbon-cutting ceremony beside a freshly paved highway, media cameras rolling, national flags fluttering. State broadcasters herald the project as a leap toward modernisation, a testament to partnership and forward-facing ambition. But behind the scenes, critical documents in government archives are nowhere to be found. 3 bids from reputable regional firms have been logged as withdrawn, with no explanation, their proponents unable to reach anyone who'll acknowledge the process. The contract went without competition to a leading Chinese state-owned conglomerate, sealed just after a string of unrecorded private meetings where personal devices were checked at the door and official minutes were never kept. On paper, due diligence prevails. In practice, it's orchestration by design. The polished facade reassures the public. In private, accountability dissolves into fog. This dual reality is not a glitch, but a deliberate architecture, the overt display of order used as camouflage for the invisible machinery humming underneath. Isolated scandals help spark investigations and spark outrage. But investigate deeply and a pattern emerges, one that stretches far beyond accidental collusion or the misjudgment of any lone bureaucrat. From Nairobi to Belgrade, from Southeast Asia to Eastern Europe, Chinese state firms reading from a consistent playbook work in tandem with local brokers, intermediaries, and powerful allies positioned within ministries and business chambers. They undercut market bids with impossible margins, enabled by state-backed financing and insurance guarantees. Offers flood in with no apparent concern for profit on the initial deal. Shadow payments are quietly authorised, structured through staggered layers of intermediary firms that crisscross tax havens and transfer hubs unbound by local reporting. The real prize isn't ostensible ownership, but commanding leverage over ports, rail lines, industrial parks and energy nodes. Assets critical not only to commerce, but to national security and regional influence. The legal paperwork for these victories is surgically precise, notarized and archived. But every profitable margin, every convenient approval process sits atop a shadow architecture invisible to parliaments and auditors. The duality is not accidental, it's systemic, maintained by policies refined over years and shielded by high-level diplomacy. Structural analysis of the system reveals high degrees of coordination and statecraft. The formal institutions host process, with public tenders, published regulations, and mandated anti-corruption clauses, a framework that on its face resembles global norms. But slipped in between are wrinkles that render oversight impotent. Discretionary exemptions for critical infrastructure, adjudication boards staffed by political appointees, and carve-outs for state-tied partners who bear a seal of strategic alignment. Auditors uncover footprints of companies that dissolve as soon as scrutiny intensifies, only to be reconstituted under different names elsewhere. Institutional reforms, when announced, are often cosmetic. new transparency portals that report little and deliver less, or anti-corruption commissions whose mandates halt at the edge of powerful interests. Real consequences for malpractice remain rare or heavily circumscribed, reinforcing the system's underlying impunity. The broader context reveals complex interplay between official policy and informal networks. As official delegations sign new bilateral memoranda, parallel discussions continue out of sight, mediated by professional fixers skilled in bridging regulatory gaps and managing relationships with local power brokers. Political incentives compound. Elected officials find themselves weighing quick injections of capital, prestige projects with visible impact, and campaign contributions redirected off budget, often in anticipation of future political debts. For those in charge, the choice is rarely only about economic calculus. Personal enrichment, consolidation of authority, and subtle forms of coercion all play into the calculus. International financial agencies, under pressure to reward development and wary of deterring investment, are often reluctant to press too hard for answers. Meanwhile, the system's flexibility is tested and proven continuously, repelling obstacles by adapting its visible form while preserving its hidden function. Across the table from Western or regional rivals, Chinese state enterprises consistently submit bids that seem impossibly competitive. Initial offers arrive well below prevailing market rates, buoyed by concessional financing from policy banks and state export credit insurance, risk absorbed collectively, not at the project level. These discounts are not acts of charity, but instruments wielded to achieve outsized strategic payoffs. The funding gaps are supplemented by payments routed surreptitiously, illicit commissions for key gatekeepers and localised project support expenses shuffled through layered subsidiaries. Local brokers, often with split loyalties, ease the passage by leveraging connections to business and administrative elites. While international standards for procurement are evoked, the actual decision pathways are quietly redirected. Regulations reinterpreted, review boards steered, vetting processes narrowed to exclude inconvenient contenders. Each contract brings not just revenues but operational control, new leverage points within national supply chains, regulatory influence over imports and exports, even input into labour and tax policy as a condition of continued investment. The parallel system institutionalises itself, sending ripples through both markets and civil society. Bank statements leak in the aftermath, documenting funds laundered through third-party accounts, agreements signed with almost identical layouts, payout tables eerily consistent from country to country. Whistleblowers, often protected only by temporary anonymity and foreign media outlets, reveal payout schedules and correspondence between senior executives that expose how domestic officials are co-opted in exchange for post-tenure sinecures or cash advances. Parliamentary hearings sporadically flare up, driven by opposition figures and NGOs, but the substantive answers dissolve amid redactions, vanished hard drives, and vanished witnesses. International investigations, coordinated through intergovernmental partnerships, reveal the same signature divergences between public contracts and financial flows. The layers of obfuscation multiply. New shell entities appear just as others are struck off, paper trails disrupted by sudden document loss or cyber sabotage. For every intermediary exposed, another rises to take its place. When the pressure escalates, the machinery's global reach becomes unmistakable. A European government, in a moment of unusual resolve, suspends final approval of a flagship harbour contract, citing national security and suspected illicit payments. Newsrooms erupt. Leaked investigation files disclose encrypted chat logs, secret back-channel meetings at private hotels, and warnings against local regulators who threaten to block the project. Internal communications reveal the sophistication of the play. Risk maps, threat analyses, fallback plans that include diplomatic interventions if legal hurdles arise. The project's architecture embeds lock-in clauses. If cancelled, severe penalties apply. Operational control is hardwired to transnational holding groups that can sue for damages in arbitration venues chosen for their favourable rules. The system's adaptability is clear. What looks like ordinary bid rigging at a distance is in fact a carefully constructed regime that makes reversal extraordinarily costly, financially, politically, and institutionally. Security agencies express alarm at the entrenchment of foreign actors not only in business, but in the regulatory and logistical arteries of the state. National authorities, under pressure from both citizens and international partners, attempt institutional responses. Independent commissions launch investigations and convene public hearings. Special anti-corruption courts are established to try offenders. Banking regulators examine flows from state-led consortia. A few officials are detained, and highly publicised trials reveal fragments of the networks. Annotated account ledgers hint at deeper ties, but convictions rarely reach the architects of the model. In the aftermath, task forces attempt to close procurement loopholes, update transparency mandates, and publish partial lists of beneficial owners in tenders. Yet the substantive consequences often fall short. A system so deeply entangled with political patronage and international interests proves remarkably resilient to piecemeal reform. The escalation of civil society activism provokes backlash. Journalists face intimidation or legal peril, and new transparency laws are challenged in courts stacked with loyalists. External donors, prompted to withhold or condition funds, often encounter pushback or creative workarounds by local officials, determined to keep lucrative projects flowing. Meanwhile, the economic consequences mount. Debt levels surge in host countries as repayment calendars collide with fiscal shortfalls, sparking a crippling wave of currency devaluation and social unrest. Protesters fill city centres to demand answers for evaporated public resources, while governments scramble to renegotiate terms or seek money from elsewhere. Global credit agencies downgrade ratings. The cycle intensifies. Each unsuccessful audit and broken investigation sends a message that the system's rewards are worthwhile, even when the costs are enormous. Other players, watching from the sidelines, move in to adopt the same playbook. Multinational contractors and sovereign funds deploying imitative schemes designed for opacity and influence. The template, engineered by statecraft and protected by diplomatic ambiguity, expands far beyond its original context. Major infrastructure projects in Latin America, Central Asia, and even developed European economies begin to show the same fingerprints. Discrete shadow payments, vanished competitors, contractual strings attached to core logistics corridors. Patterns established under the Belt and Road banner become transnational, catalysing a global race for strategic footholds disguised as development or partnership. The original ideal of the Belt and Road Initiative, sold as a cooperative, development-centred future, fades beneath the advancing shadow of its engineered mechanism. The system itself becomes the model to imitate. The boundaries between market, state, and strategic ambition are dissolved, reconstructed to favour those players adept at navigating both legality and its twilight. The narrative moves from hopes of mutual modernity toward an uneasy acknowledgement of asymmetric influence, of roads and ports that serve public needs, but are mortgaged, sometimes permanently, to external priorities invisible on the ledger. The struggle for beneficial ownership ricochets from committee rooms to foreign investment review panels, each grappling with details that remain deliberately incomplete, each forced to confront how easily fairness can be traded for expedient progress. The world continues to watch as hundreds of billions in project funds move across continents, one contract at a time, one milestone after another. The consequences ripple through systems. Ports envisioned as engines of prosperity double as nodes of strategic command. Highways constructed under the banner of partnership recalibrate trade patterns for decades. Regulatory reforms spurred by scandal are incrementally undone by new actors fluent in the game. Civil society and investigative journalists labour to illuminate what they can. But every exposé reveals more layers, more proxies, more carefully engineered grey zones. The lesson is absorbed by new bidders and emerging powers alike. In a world where oversight is easily bypassed and accountability is always deferred, the most powerful instrument is not just infrastructure, but the ability to quietly rewrite the rules of sovereignty and influence itself. In the end, the question has only grown sharper. As the blueprint for procurement, influence and ownership copies itself from continent to continent, the formal difference between development and domination blurs. The incentives endure, even as names and faces change. Some countries have already swapped decades of future policy space for projects whose price tags were never truly disclosed. And what remains, long after the ribbon cutting and the headlines, is a new global precedent, one quietly closed deal at a time, remaking the world's roads, ports and futures while leaving the question of true control forever just out of reach.